Hey, welcome back to the second half of the review lecture on microbiology and infection prevention. We're focusing now on Chapter 6, Infection Prevention. So, the central service professional plays a significant role in the prevention of surgical site and healthcare associated infections. If you didn't know that yet, I'm sorry, but we are crucial. We have to clean properly, sterilize properly, clean, sterilize, clean, supply, store, sterilize, clean. It's what we do. So, moving on. In central service, in the most simplistic terms, CS supports infection prevention by cleaning contaminated medical devices, inspecting instruments to help ensure that they're safe and functional, assembling and packaging instruments in a manner that facilitates the sterilization of various methods of sterilization, making sure that we select and properly use the sterilization or high-level disinfection method as prescribed by the instructions from the manufacturer of said devices, and safely storing the items for future use. Okay, there is some cause for concern. We went over these numbers earlier, but if you're looking at page 102, look at the numbers again. These numbers are much higher than I think you or I want. Approximately 722,000 out of hospitalized patients contract an healthcare-associated infection each year as of 2011. These numbers come from the CDC. And approximately 75,000 of those patients died during their hospitalizations. Not good. Let's bring that number down, down, by always following the correct process and even going above and beyond. Okay, you should know what biocidal means, what a surgical site infection is, and you should understand the chain of infection. So, isolation precautions originated with something called quarantine. In the days of quarantine, they would separate patients into a quarantine ward. Now what we do is isolation precautions, and each patient has their own room, and anybody who goes into the room will wear the appropriate PPE depending on the nature of the disease organism. So there are some for airborne pathogens, some for contact pathogens. And in order to protect healthcare staff and patients from infectious diseases, what we have now is called standard precautions, which means that we treat every patient's body fluid, blood and body fluids, as if they are potentially infectious with microorganisms, because we don't need to know that a patient has something infectious. We need to assume that they have something infectious, and that's going to protect us and then our communities. So we also have what we call asepsis. Asepsis is the absence of microorganisms that cause disease. And in asepsis, we have aseptic techniques, how we handle items. Beginning with medical asepsis, washing your hands with your fingertips down. Make sure you remove your ring because we don't want to. Okay. Medical asepsis is a clean technique. It is different from surgical asepsis, which is what they do in the operating room. They wash their hands with their fingertips up. Rings off, of course. They wash their hands with their fingertips up. The point of medical asepsis is to remove much bacteria and oils from your skins, etc., and be clean. It's hand hygiene. Surgical asepsis is the absence of all microorganisms. So the people who work in the OR suite need to be sterile. And of course, the things we provide for them need to be sterile. So there are 5 principles of asepsis for a central service technician. The principles are, you should know what is dirty. How do you know what is dirty? Well, if you can't have evidence that it's clean, then you can say it's dirty. Things that we know are dirty are contaminated with blood or body fluids. They just came from the procedures. We know they're dirty, so we clean them. How do we know they're clean, though, when they come out of the cleaning process? We can run tests on the washers, on the instruments themselves, to make sure that our cleaning processes are effective. And then you should know what is sterile. How do you know what is sterile? We have indicators in the sterilization processes that give us feedback that we can use. We can collect the data and we can say there's a high probability that this item is sterile. Still no proof, but so we're separating what is dirty and what is clean and what is sterile. So the fourth principle of asepsis is to keep all of these conditions separate. And the fifth is if you should run across some contamination, a sterile set sitting next to a dirty set, you have two dirty sets. So you fix that contamination by re-cleaning both sets. Note that a careless attitude may lead to an increased risk of infections, so CS professionals must always be aware of their actions. Let's treat everything and every patient as if they're the top priority, because they should be, and our own health as well. Okay, CS professionals must assume several important responsibilities in their facility's infection prevention and control efforts. The infection prevention and control goals of the CS department are to eliminate and or destroy all potentially infectious contaminants present on reusable instruments and equipment. Safely distribute reusable and single-use items required for the delivery of patient care, and to establish and enforce standards for decontamination, disinfection, and sterilization in various healthcare settings. Personal hygiene, this is where we start. Hand hygiene is considered to be the single most important factor in reducing infections. And how do you do hand hygiene? Remove your jewelry, put it in your locker, don't wear it in the department, and you wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap under running water. Very basic process. So basic that if you look at page 106 and you look at the pictures of someone washing their hands, you'll probably say, hey, I've been doing that for years. Keep doing it. You should know that my fingernails are getting a little too shabby here, and if I were working in a department, I would want to make sure that I cut them short and keep them clean, because fingernails can hold on to and then redeposit microorganisms to surfaces where we don't want them, and we don't want them on our surgical instruments. Even though they're going to go through a sterilization process, we don't want to add to the bioburden on the instruments. And you should not wear artificial nails or fingernail polish, because these can fall off or flake off and get into the instrument sets, and that's just counterproductive to what we're trying to do. When you're working in a central service department, you are going to wear proper attire, which consists of the hospital provided scrubs and your hair covering and your shoe covers, and that's pretty much it. That's proper attire for the clean side of sterile processing. You should not be wearing necklaces or any jewelry because they can harbor microorganisms. Okay. You should not be wearing a t-shirt or any undergarment that sticks out past your scrub sleeve. Like this t-shirt might be too long. I'll tell you what though, because most scrubs have some sort of a V-neck right here, you don't want this exposed to the environment, because you wore it in from the parking lot, and so it has contamination on it. Although you can't see it, and although you just washed it this morning at home, it's still going to bring contamination into your department. Now, some hospitals will say you don't need to wear shoe covers as long as you are actually not wearing the shoes that you wear in the department outside. And so it's a good idea to have shoes that are dedicated to the area, that are not worn outside of the facility. In the decontamination area, proper attire is required, and then we supplement that with extra additional equipment called PPE, personal protective equipment, and this consists of a fluid-resistant gown or apron, a mask, goggles, a face shield full length, shoe covers, and gloves. Okay, now goggles and the face shield, you can use either or. I personally prefer the face shield because the goggles only protect you right here, and then if you get something splashing on your face, it's just kind of icky, and you're probably not going to have time to take a shower on your lunch break, so wear the face shield. A face shield, however, does not replace the need for the mask, and the mask should cover not only the mouth but also the nose. And no, I didn't touch my face. It was very close, though. Okay. The CDC recommendations for how to put on PPE, they recommend that you go gown or jumpsuit, mask, goggles or face shield, shoe covers, and then gloves. And then for removing the PPE, they recommend you go remove your shoe covers, remove your gloves, remove goggles or face shield, remove your gown, remove your mask, and remove your head covering and wash your hands. So that head covering that you were wearing on the clean side to protect the patient, the instruments and etc. from your hairs becomes personal protective equipment when you're working in decontam. So it is considered contaminated. Get rid of it. Don't leave that room without removing it first. Remove your gloves before you start removing your face mask because your hands, gloved hands, are very contaminated. Your gloves, I should say, are very contaminated. Okay, we have to manage our environment to prevent the spread of bacteria on both sides. So the first step in maintaining environmental integrity is to control traffic that enters and passes through the CS department. The aforementioned dress code applies to all who enter the CS department. There are some, I don't want to say exceptions, but okay, we'll say exceptions. If you see somebody in your department wearing a jumpsuit, a white pullover suit, we often call a bunny suit, they're probably only going to be in there for 5 or 10 minutes, and that is standard practice. You don't have to worry about that. But if you see somebody like a doctor getting off the elevator, not wearing his hair cover, carrying copy, he's lost, help him find the exit and direct him to wherever he's looking for, because he should not be walking through there. Sterile processing is not a shortcut, and neither side, neither the clean nor the dirty side. Okay, sterile processing is a semi-restricted area, which means you have to have the proper attire. The OR is a restricted area, so sterile processing is semi-restricted, OR is restricted. The addition of a mask. You should not use an OR for a shortcut ever. You should never enter an OR without, or any procedure room, without wearing a mask, because your breath can contaminate the environment. And then there's the unrestricted areas like the cafeteria and waiting rooms and things like that, where you just need to be dressed. Okay, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, has a something we call the Bloodborne Pathogen Standard. And I want you to review page 111 and note all of the bullet points and sub-bullet points of what is required with the Bloodborne Pathogen Standard. Use of PPE, by the way, is not optional. You cannot say, oh, it makes me uncomfortable. You have to wear it when you're working in the decontamination area. That is the law. And in any environment where there's going to be disposal of contaminated items, the decontamination room, there should be red bags, which do not have to be marked with a biohazard symbol, and there should be hard-sided containers for disposing of sharps. So red bags for blood-soaked rags, hard-sided containers that have a biohazard symbol printed on them for things that are sharp, things that could poke, hard things. Hard-sided containers are usually orange or orange-red. Okay, now I've landed on page 113. We're going to start talking about work area cleanliness. Work area cleanliness is important. The area should be cleaned routinely and very well. Both areas, decontamination and the clean side. All surfaces, mouses, pens should be cleanable. Paper is not cleanable. So all surfaces should be cleanable because all surfaces are considered fomites. I can touch the surface and deposit bacteria on it. Fomite. Okay, if you bring that into your department, you're bringing in a fomite. It could have strange bacteria from outside world. So if you are allowed to bring that in, please just disinfect it. A fomite is an inanimate object that can transmit bacteria. Okay, note, food and beverages are not allowed in sterile processing, clean side, dirty side, storage, breakout room. If you don't know why yet, it's because they could spill or they could attract bugs. They could contaminate items that are sterile. So that's on page 113. Review that. Housekeeping and sterile processing. The area needs to be cleaned routinely. So floors should be kept clean. Good news, you're probably not going to be the one doing that. Environmental Services usually is the one who does that. If you see them bring in a broom or a dust mop, stop them. These floors in our department should be wet mopped at least daily. Wet mopped. The decontamination area should have its own separate and dedicated cleaning supplies because we don't want to cross-contaminate going back and forth from clean to dirty with the same cleaning tools. There's no reason for it. Just make sure you have your own dedicated cleaning supplies in the decontamination room. And making sure that surfaces like tabletops and all of the working equipment that you have, the mouse on the computer, this at your workstation, all these surfaces should be cleaned routinely. Work tables should be cleaned at least daily and preferably every shift. There are some other environmental cleaning requirements like fixtures and furniture. Okay, so the light fixtures, they're probably not going to be done by you. No, they're not going to be done by you. Maybe environmental services or the facilities people will come in and do the air duct vents and the fixtures on the ceilings. It should be done routinely, and how often depends on the environment you're working in. It should be a regularly scheduled thing though. Okay, now the chain of infection. On page 115, it tells us that the chain of infection starts with the causative agent. So let's use HIV. HIV is the causative agent. HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus. And the reservoir of the virus is wherever it's able to survive. Let's say the infected person. The portal of exit is, let's say, a surgical wound. The mode of transmission is, how about a knife blade left on a knife handle can cut you, or cut you, and then the virus can get into your bloodstream. You will be the susceptible host, and then you have the causative agent, and you are the reservoir. It can get out of you, be transferred, big circle. So the causative agent is the first link in the chain of infection. The characteristics that make the organism capable of causing disease include its invasiveness, its pathogenicity, its virulence, which is the degree of its pathogenicity, the infectious dose, its viability in a free state, its ability to develop resistance to antimicrobial agents. So the only way to interrupt the transmission of a causative agent is to completely eliminate it. So proper cleaning, proper sterilization, but always proper handling. Okay, some key terms on this page is causative agent, reservoir, portal of exit, mode of transmission, portal of entry, and susceptible host, and carrier. A carrier is a person who may have the disease-causing organisms on or in them, but themselves are not affected by the disease. They don't show any symptoms. All right. Mode of transmission. Think mode of transmission. This is what we do. We eliminate the pathogens on surgical instruments and other surfaces like patient care equipment. Okay. So, fomites are the inanimate surfaces. Common vehicle transmission occurs when infectious agents are present in a vehicle such as food, salmonella, blood, HIV, or water, pseudomonas. Then there's vector-borne transmission, which rarely occurs in the United States. In the U.S. hospitals. Agents can be carried on insects, on the feet or wings of flies, or by the bites of insects or arthropods, mosquitoes, ticks, and fleas. When you're working in your department and you see a fly in front of your face, you're going to get used to this. All right, we got a fly. Everybody has to stop. Everybody has to stop what they're doing and get the fly, because that vector carries diseases. Imagine if it gets into a tray when somebody's not looking and they put the lid on it and they lock it down. Okay. Then the fly gets up to the operating room and it's dead because it went through a sterilization process. But our sterilization processes are not designed to kill the organisms that are inside of the flies, so the entire set, of course, is contaminated. The portals of exit and the portals of entry are the same. There is one difference. Parenterally. Parenteral means something that's put inside the body but not by swallowing, like an injection administered into the muscle, or sharing a dirty needle. We've probably all heard of that happening before. So that's parenterally. But otherwise, portal of entry and exit are respiratory tract, the GU tract, the GI tract, through skin or mucous membranes, and transplacental. Okay, a susceptible host. If you look at these bullet points under this subheading, you'll see that it describes patients. Young, old, underlying disease history, medications and treatments that can compromise immune systems, trauma. So all of our patients are susceptible hosts. So if we fail to do what we need to do, and we transmit a microorganism that can cause disease, we're transmitting it to somebody who is already a susceptible host. Look at the chain of infection from a CS perspective. Where are we on that chain of infection? We are at surgical instruments inadequately sterilized between patients. Okay, thank you for watching this. And please be ready for any tests or quizzes that are upcoming. And I will see you next time. Thank you.